Failure happens because you're pushing past new boundaries into regions you've never been before. Exploration, growth, and learning demand failure. Don't feel failure, fear not failing enough. Welcome, listeners, to another podcast episode of Champion Reads, where we talk about best-selling books by best-selling authors and the principles that are in there. I am pleased to be here with you today. My name is William Blake, and with me, we also have our other executive producer, Mr. Ian Sturmer, as well as the founder of Champion Circle, John Kovach Jr. Today, we're going to continue our talk about the alter ego effect by Todd Herman. And more specifically, because we don't just talk about the books. That's not why the book club's here. The book club is here so that we can take those principles and have a good discussion about them. Today, we're going to talk about setting boundaries as well as performance enhancement in the realm of what Todd talks about with the alter ego effect. So let's first just jump into boundary setting. I don't know about you guys, but whenever I think of boundaries, I think of confrontation. Is that the right word? Confronting someone. Because I don't always see it as a pleasant experience of setting a boundary if you don't want people to do something. And so I remember back when I was working at Walmart in the produce section, there was one of my coworkers, and they would get after management for getting after them for, which is, kind of ironic, but they wouldn't do anything. They being the coworker, like they wouldn't do their job, and then they get after management and say, "Hey, what the heck? You guys are always so rough with me. You're always coming after me." And then I had this conversation with a coworker, and we were standing there, and we are putting salads up on the wet wall. And while we're doing that, I'm like, "Hey, what's going on, man? What's the deal with you and management?" He goes off with this whole thing about it, and I'm like, "So do you think they're setting rules, or do you think they're setting boundaries?" And we had a really good discussion about that. And afterwards, it came out, and he's just like, "Well, I guess they have the rules in place, but they're setting boundaries so that I don't lose my job." It was like a whole 180 flip from this anger side to this understanding side. And he just went out the rest of the day. I think he talked with management after and had a good conversation. But setting boundaries is important, because when we set boundaries, one, in our personal lives, like on one-on-one, it sets the standard for how we want people to interact with us. As well as when you take it into business and set boundaries, some people do it. Some people do it just because they don't want to deal with it. But I think most of the time people bring up rules, bring up laws, bring up whatever it is, because they're trying to help you to be better, or helping you and saving you from dropping off the railroad track, in that term of phrase. So I'd like to hear Ian, I'd love to hear your thoughts on boundary setting.
Yeah. We always hate boundaries and hate rules and hate these regulations we have to follow. But I think that my favorite analogy with that is a kite. If you're flying a kite and it's on the string, there's the story of the little boy who said, "Can't we cut the string so the kite can fly and be free and go as high as it wants to and not be limited?" But of course, as soon as you cut the string in that kite, the whole thing comes crashing down. So it's actually that boundary, that limitation, that allows it to fly. It's not what holds it back. And in so much of our life, that's the case. And I think as we look at the alter ego effect here and boundaries, each of our roles we have has different boundaries. And we have to understand where those boundaries are and what we can do within that context. Like you said, with your example at Walmart, first they're kind of complaining that these bosses are putting all these rules and regulations, and it's terrible how mean they are to me, because they're looking at them in the persona of an evil boss. And in that conversation you had, you changed their role, or in a sense, their alter ego of your boss into a friend who's there to help them. And then suddenly those boundaries changed completely. And I think that's something to keep in mind, that every situation has a different boundary that we need to be in. I was just talking, my son-in-law is visiting us with us these last couple of days. And a couple of times in the conversation, I started by saying, I'm going to step into my dad role for a minute here and say this to you. And other times when I talk to him, I'm in the friend role. And sometimes I have to explain what my boundary and my alter ego is, or my role is for that time. And when I do that, then the boundary that I set makes sense. And he can say, okay, he's being a dad. That's why he's saying that. So I can listen from that one. And now he's being a friend, or now he's being a business person to talk to me. So I think as we understand the role we're in and how the boundaries fit that, when we're speaking, and maybe especially when we're listening to people, so that we're not being that one, like your example, offended and upset and harming ourselves through negative emotions, but instead feeling that the positive side of it. So yes, understanding where those boundaries are and the role that those boundaries fit in, I think is critical to us being happy and succeeding.
There's a story I love to tell that has been one I've written about, and it stems from an experience I had in college where a speaker came to our college and gave a presentation, and he talked about the rebuilding of the memorial for the 9/11 towers. And what happened was, because the towers had fallen on 9/11, the ground was completely destroyed. The foundations of the island of Manhattan had really created some big problems, especially for a lot of the surrounding buildings as well. And so finding a way to remove the debris and create a memorial for those two buildings was merely impossible. Just skating around all the rules, the delegations, the city council regulations, and just everything. But rather than having an open canvas for all freedom, they said that actually having all of these rules and boundaries is what gave them the inspirations to operate and create one of the world's most impressive memorials ever built. And if you've ever been to the 9/11 memorial place on the island, it is remarkable. It is breathtaking. It is such an experience. You can almost envision the tower standing in those spots, and they did a great job. But the inspiration behind the story was the rules, the regulations, and the boundaries are what gave us the direction and light to be able to create what we did. Had we had just a blank canvas with all the freedom and ideas in the world, we may not have ever come to a beautiful conclusion. So boundaries are a restricted access that only give us enhancements where they lead us to go. So by setting boundaries in our life, whether that's through relationships or through actions, or boundaries in which literally pinballs can bounce off of, where we know what our starting and stopping points are, boundaries are important because they give us a more defined and clarified direction as to how and what we should do in our operations moving forward. So I'm really impressed by this concept.
I it makes me think of a conversation I had about a week ago, um, with setting boundaries, because I loved what you said in that, um, like the importance of boundaries in the way that I think you also need to communicate them, right? It should never be assumed, the boundaries. The A week ago, I had a conversation with my property management, and they didn't get back to me for a little bit, and so I'm assuming that they're doing bad business. But when I found out, they were just training a new hire. It helped me realize, because I've been in property management before, and I know that when you have a new hire, it like they're a new hire for a couple weeks, and it takes a little bit to catch up onto the work that piles up once you get a new person in there. And so when they said that, I flipped a whole 180. I'm just in my mind, I was just like, I'm so sorry for the negative thoughts that I had about you the last couple days that no one else is going to know except whoever listens to this now. um, but boundaries just need to be communicated, because when you communicate them, um, perspectives grow, right? My wife, we've gotten in a few arguments over the last. We realized that we weren't. Hopefully, my audio's okay. We were realizing that we weren't getting the best out of our relationship, and that was because we weren't communicating the boundaries that we need. I know when my mind gets all cloudy and such, I need to take a 10-minute break. I just need to jump out, take 10 minutes, and then jump back in. My wife, she needs to jump out for a little bit longer, and that's just how she processes her feelings. So whenever we get in an argument, or whenever the kids are just kind of so overwhelming that we can't take it, we were just walking off, being like, I'm done. I need time. And when we first did it, we got angry with each other, because one leaving the kids there with one parent when both of us were stressed out, it just seemed messed up. It seemed irresponsible. It's, all those negative things that come into your mind. But it was just like, hey, I just need a timeout. Can you handle it for 10, 15 minutes? And when that was communicated, it's just like, yeah, absolutely, I can do that. And so, jumping back to setting boundaries, and we'll wrap that into the alter ego effect in a second. But it's just so important that when you set boundaries, they got to be communicated. And the easiest way to communicate them is first, right when it happens, not a year or two down the road.
Yeah, I'll jump in and just say, yeah, I love the idea that the boundaries create a better, safer, more balanced avenue. So people are probably wondering, like, when it comes to the alter ego effect, how do you set boundaries for yourself? And I'll answer that question, and my opinions are probably different than everyone else's, which is what makes this podcast so unique and fun. I'll go back to the example in episode 1 on this discussion where we talk about the various roles that we play. And if I'm putting on my hat, and let's say my hat is my competitive volleyball playing hat, right? And my role on the volleyball team is to block, no mercy, take everyone's name, right? And to spike the ball as hard as I possibly can so that I can generate a win competitively for my team. If I am wearing the same volleyball hat while at the grocery store, they're going to ask me to leave in a hurry because I'm spiking all the cereal boxes and I'm throwing down the watermelons. I can't wear that hat. And so when it comes to wearing the right hat in the right situation, you create boundaries for yourself by knowing what's socially appropriate, by knowing what you should do in every scenario. You will be thoroughly exhausted, but I don't think you will be unfulfilled if you put on a hat and wear it a little too long. I think you'll be satisfied with your results and you'll push yourself in ways that you can go longer. It's just like training for a marathon. In order to run a marathon, you have to be able to train so that you can run 26.2 miles. And if you decide to cut short on that, it's going to be very, very painful. Just like any other thing, as we take on various roles, as we use our alter egos at work, or if we need to pump ourselves up to take a sales call or do something that's uncomfortable or do something that's just out of our norm, we take on our alter egos so that we can be the superhero that we really are. But you've got to train, you've got to practice, and you've got to do this. And making that balance is just knowing when to start, when to stop. And also, your boundaries are when you should take off that hat and where that is appropriate in different circumstances. I might want to put on the volleyball hat when I'm being sold a new vehicle so that I don't come across as easy and someone who will just listen to whatever the car salesman will say, right? I may want to alter my ego in order to get things and get better results. And that just takes time and practice. And that's usually my answer for most things is, patience, time, and practice, because that is a lot of what goes into the betterment of people and humans. I mean, we're not always going to be perfect. We're not always going to be the best, the best of ourselves all the time, but we're trying. And the only person who really is in effect here is you, because you're the only one who knows. And when you have that sense, and I'm going to say something that might come across as controversial because some people accept it and still some people don't. I know, right? Oh no, don't say anything political. No, it's about this idea that people are experiencing imposter syndrome. And there's two reasonings behind it, in my opinion. And again, my opinion is not a doctor's opinion. It's John Kovach, right? And I know that it's a real thing, but I want people to understand that the reason why you're exhausted and you're feeling like an imposter sometimes is because you're not giving yourself the well-balanced breakfast of that alter ego, or you haven't practiced enough. Because actors, when they get off stage, for the first show, they're probably exhausted. It's a new experience. They've been rehearsing and rehearsing. But after the 12th show, they can do it with their eyes closed and they can do 3 shows in one night, and it's no big deal. So just taking on a persona is important to know that it takes time and practice. You've got to have patience with your results. It does take time. Overnight successes are not the types of successes you should seek to have, because they can create problems down the road. So the other reason and excuse is that it really is a medical condition that you don't feel yourself, and that is something you should definitely see a therapist for, or go talk to your doctor, because there are medical reasons. But if it just has to do with being out of alignment, it means you haven't practiced enough. You haven't spent enough time mastering the trade that you're projecting yourself to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the alter ego saying, hey, you're really inflating yourself for something that we haven't trained for yet. You're 1 mile into 26.2 miles. We should have practiced longer. You might want to take a small walk for a little bit, or intervals, right? You might want to pace yourself. So that's your body responding to what it really is going through. And that's why it's a real thing. But yeah, I wanted to share into that.
Yeah. First of all, to be controversial, you're all wrong. But other than that, but I love what you're saying there. And you get into imposter syndrome, I think that really fits the idea of boundaries. And I think when we're creating that alter ego, we need to clearly define the boundaries of what that alter ego is there to do. What are we trying to accomplish, and making sure that it's what we really want. These alter egos are to help us become the person we want to be for that situation, not to become what somebody else wants us to be. And as we take time to define what we want that character to be, whether it's us as a speaker or us in the boardroom or us as a parent, whatever it is, we need to make it what we actually want. I somewhat jokingly say that I am the biggest hypocrite when I go to church, because I am not nearly as wonderful and righteous and spiritual as I act like when I'm there. But that's what I want to be. So I create some of that alter ego to be the person I want to be, not to be a phony with it. And as you create those boundaries, I think that allows you to move from one to another without really the problems with that. And just a real quick example I love of that, if you guys are familiar with Norma Jean Mortensen, who is better known as Marilyn Monroe. And according to legend, she would walk down the street with her friends and no one would pay her any attention. And she'd say, "Watch this." And she would put on her alter ego of Marilyn Monroe. And people would run up and ask for autographs and turn around and stare at her. But she had defined the difference between those so much that people could see which one she was in. But unfortunately, in the end, she blurred that and she lost her own identity and kind of had a tragic ending of her life through that. So that's kind of the idea of the boundaries, to define what you want to be and help you move back and forth between those.
I love what's being said because it hits upon the point that I didn't realize until now. Like we keep saying the alter ego effect, obviously, because that's the book that we have. But John, the way that you said it, it's altering our ego. And I'm like, wow, that changes a lot. Because a lot of times we might think of ego as the pride, the overzealous of confidence and everything. But if you actually look at the definition on Google, it's your self-esteem. It's like what you think about yourself. And so altering your ego in different moments does exactly what you two just spoke about. It's changing it so that you can become more of your true self in different instances. John, you mentioned imposter syndrome. Absolutely. A lot of us are living imposter syndrome. And I think a lot of us are living in alter egos that we call our everyday life. When instead our true selves, the ones that we want and desire, the ones that our souls and spirits tell us that we are, that's under all the leaves of lies and traumas and everything. But that's like our true self that we go to. So I think if we jump to like Clark Kent and Superman, like Clark Kent is said to be the alter ego of Superman. And so Superman, he has strength. He has, I think, laser eyes, if I'm remembering right. But he can fly. He's Superman. He can do a lot of stuff. But there are moments where he just can't be that at that time. And so he goes over to Clark Kent for a little bit. That's kind of the same as what we need to be, not to stay with imposter syndrome, but to transform out of imposter syndrome, of taking who we think that we are and start unraveling it, start building boundaries, start changing our performance to be able to get to a more truer self of who we are. And I think that, that can be in any part in life. But I think most importantly is setting the boundary of you can't be that person all at once right here, right now, because you have not practiced it, you have not experienced it, you have not gotten into that mode. But we talk about consistent little steps of slowly turning yourself back to who you truly are. You are then altering your ego back to who your ego is, not the bad version, but the self-esteem, the self-confidence of who you are.
Yeah, let's go back to the idea of training for a marathon, right? Because if you are wearing a particular hat and you need to switch that role real quick, a great way to separate the different egos, right, is oxygen. Oxygen is the number one thing, and it is literally the same thing as training for a race, as you are training to enhance your ego, which you're absolutely right, Willie. Our ego is literally our self-esteem. It has nothing to do with being someone different than who you are. The argument of, is Clark Kent Superman or is Superman Clark Kent? There's no argument because it is the same. But I do love Ian's example of Marilyn Monroe because it is her portrayal that caused people to line up and take photos and paparazzi her, right? But it's the portrayal of who she is will never change who she is deep down in her core. It's just esteem, and it's also how you are perceived and how you put yourself in that position to be perceived. But we got to train for it. And I love breathing exercises. I will say every single day, have you breathed today? Like, have you taken a big deep breath? And if you need to, I oftentimes you'll see me go off camera. Yeah, thanks, Ian. I love that example because I'll either go off camera because I need to take a deep breath. And it's not because I'm mad or frustrated or anything. It's just I recognize in myself that I need to reset. And you mentioned it, Willie, you mentioned it, Ian, a little bit too, like taking resets, like separating them, giving yourself the okay, I'm done with that part of the ego. Now I got to move to the next part of the ego. Giving yourself enough repetition and recovery is just as important as running a race. And I love this example because we really do need to breathe more often. And I've done several breathing exercises. It's as easy as breathing in through your nose and breathing out through your mouth, or keeping in and out through your nose. It's really, really helpful. I wasn't on camera at the beginning of this call because I literally, guys, this is the middle of allergy season, and I am having crazy allergy attacks and all these things going on that I never had as a kid. And I'm realizing, oh, I just need to reset. So taking a big deep breath and shooting myself up with whatever I need to shoot up with, the Mucinex or whatever it might be. That's something that I need to take advantage of. But it's also about awareness, is it not? Because our awareness of who we are, where we're at, and how we're feeling is exactly where we need to take those steps. So no, none of us are perfect at what we're doing. Our steams are in a constant state of growth or digression, and we need to feed it through proper training, awareness, love, compassion, and giving what it really truly needs to thrive, and taking care of our bodies and our brain, which is what is the house of our ego and self-esteem, is most important. And I'll always go back to that. So anyways, I think it's a beautiful transition, but also an important thing to remember that you have the power to balance this, and you don't have to balance it like work-life balance. You can balance it like, hey, I need a reset, or hey, I just need a minute. When people are trying to make decisions and they're not in the right place to make decisions, you'll hear them breathe. It's a subconscious action. You'll hear a big sigh. People go, when they're making decisions, it's because they haven't put themselves in a place where they can confidently make decisions. And so that big, deep breath is their body saying, hey, I'm trying to catch up here. Can we make a decision? Are we in the right mindset? Are we in the right place? And when you hear that body language coming through, it's the body catching up to the mind. And I know that's not mentioned in the book, but I just wanted to use that as a transition, because when it comes to enhancing your performance, and I might be getting ahead of the cart here, but when it comes to enhancing your performance in any scenario, you do need to focus on what it is that you're doing and give yourself the right environment and the right attitude and the right experience and the right training to do so with confidence. And that's where a lot of us just lack. And it just takes time. It takes practice. We can't get impatient with the process. It is important for us to see what's in front of us and to learn how to make calculated and great positive decisions with confidence because of who we are and what we've accomplished. I think that's a great reminder. Who knew this was a podcast about the human body?
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's so true. As you're talking, the word that came to me was proactive. And you can't wait and see who you turn into in a situation. You can't start running and then see what your mindset becomes to be a marathon runner. You can't go on stage and then find out what your character is. You have to, and I'm going to go back to boundaries again, or you've got to build the boundaries proactively, create what you want to achieve, who you want to be, and build all that first so that you can step into that role. And it's you that's making it. You're still you. You're just making another you that's the way you want to be for that situation. It's not faking it. It's allowing this part of you to shine through. And it's mental, it's physical, it's performance-based, all of that, as long as we take the time to proactively build that first.
Absolutely. As we're wrapping up our thoughts, and as we hear from each other, how important is it for us to be who we're meant to be? How important is it that as we learn more about ourselves and the allergies that we have, as we go out and try to act consistently in a more improved manner, how important is it to think and realize how we need to be as humans? My mind goes to the different moments where between me needing to be a dad, from me needing to be a coach, between me needing to be a speaker, to me being trying to be an author. Like each of those different roles has, John, I know you mentioned this before, different hats. We put on different hats. And each of those hats elevates different values and different performing habits. Just like Todd Herman says in the book, he says, by embodying a more powerful, a more confident, focused, and resilient persona, individuals can push past limitations and achieve peak performance. How true is that? That by just embodying in that moment the things that we need, how much more confidence we're going to have in the task that we do, how much more focused we're going to be at the thing at hand, whether it be volleyball and spiking and being aggressive, or whether it's being an insurance agent and building a relationship, to where it's being a dad and just being loving and playful, right? And having that resilient persona, not setting up those boundaries, not letting anything come in, but to enhance ourselves so that we can go past the limitations that we're humans, that we have every single day, and to achieve that peak performance that we desire to have on a daily basis. I think it is so important to, as we are trying to alter our egos, trying to find something new, I'd say for everyone, all the champions who are listening, that to be a champion, you don't have to be much of something different. You just got to change. You just got to focus on different values at certain times. And so you might already be a champion inside. It's just you're trying to be a champion all the time in every single area, holding all the different values up at the same high performance level, which that doesn't work. But instead, when you try on your different hats for your different activities, the champion's the one that's able to focus on the 3 or 4 that's needed in that situation, and then transfer it, take that break in between, and then figure out the next 3 or 4 for the next thing. So I want to hear your guys' final thoughts on the alter ego effect as we wrap up the conversation for today.
Yeah, I'm inspired by each other's words, and it's important to take our own advices, but to also to recognize and be aware of where you're at with your ego, and to always take a deep breath in and say to yourself how important and powerful and strong and amazing you are, because your self-esteem is what is definitely being shown to the world. And when you take an advantage of understanding your esteem from that perspective, you can make a bigger difference in your life and in your results. So I hope that this podcast and these discussions definitely influence you to take care of yourself, but to also reflect on where you're at so that you can make adjustments. And that's my share.
I'm just going to say amen. I love this. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I've learned a lot here.
What a great thing to end on. Thank you, champion. Thank you for John and Ian for being here. But more importantly, thank you for you champions for listening today. If you found inspiration in this episode, go ahead and subscribe to our podcast, Champion Reads. You can find that link, all of our other social media links, and links to our events and accountability and coaching at mychampioncircle.com. And any comments that you have, we'd love to hear about them. Go ahead and email us at info@mychampioncircle.com. And we'll be more than happy to listen to your comments, reply to you. And as we're a community of champions, we want to be able to hear from you. So we're grateful for you champions for being here today. That wraps this episode up. Thank you again for everyone. And always remember to continue to be the best you can be the champion in your life. And you already are the champion. You just got to focus a little more in different areas, in different parts of your life. And you can do that through small, consistent actions. We'll see you on the next episode of Champion Reads.